afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Propagandacast Addendum with me, your host, Imperial Dane. Covering today, of course, some things I'd like to see. More specific topic, I've got sort of a large topic here called veterans, rather than end up thinking, I'm going to have to split it up. In this case, I'm going to cover one specific thing, which might also cover other bits, but basically, received accuracy. Received accuracy, I believe, is actually the devil when it comes to, actually good gameplay. I mean, it basically means, your troops are harder to hit, which basically means, there's increasingly less reason for them to use cover. For example, veteran D3 riflemen end up having almost 50% received accuracy, meaning, they take only, not half, close to half of the damage. That's not really good. I mean, again, yes, you have tanks and vehicles, but so on, but generally there should be no encouragement for infantry to run about in the bloody open and stand about there clearly for a long period of time. And all that does is basically it encourages blobbing and poor tactical play. As a rule of thumb, I mean, you generally see the old setback in Company 1 where it wasn't quite that, but you had sort of other elements, and generally they just meant, units would begin blobbing up because there'd be less risk about, standing out in the open. You might say, well, what are we supposed to do then when, we want to attack? Well, there's smoke, there's vehicles, there's other meshes, and rather than just blitzing straight in a beeline for it. Further on, of course, I mean, there'd obviously be alternatives, not saying, completely remove it, but it should be something dosed out in very careful measures, because it's something that can really go wrong. And I think at this point, with two companies' games showing their stuff leads to something bad, perhaps we should be careful about making infantry more durable when they're standing out in the open. Any sort of bonuses in that sense should mostly, for the most part, involve cover. That is, they get bonuses, for example, being light cover, they become harder to hit, for example. Even in heavy cover, they might even be, slightly further more difficult to kill, because overall they understand how to use cover better. There could even be bonuses in buildings, but overall, what should not happen is units out in the open become increasingly durable. Obviously, some should be just a bit of differentiate units that are elite from non-elite, but beyond that, it should be used incredibly sparingly. It should not be, sprinkled heavily over all infantry, and certainly not the basic infantry units like we're currently seeing, for example, the American Riflemen and the British infantry sections, because that, again, leads to, well, blobbing and overall not very interesting play. So that's generally something that should be avoided. And again, there are other things that could be looked at, like, again, giving them more measures than maneuver between cover, creating cover, or just further utilizing what little cover there's already there, rather than just making them able to stand out in the bloody open like they're, some kind of, Supermen. Again, then what's the point of the whole cover system if eventually infantry doesn't need it? Bingo. So again, that should be avoided. Again, I think it's something that sort of end up cribbing in a lot, then in particular with the Western Allies. The Germans don't get so much, then in particular the Volkskondies rather get hammered hard, farming it too much, but instead they kind of end up ramping a bit up elsewhere. So again, I mean, to avoid it, dear Relic, to avoid it, it does not lead to anything good. Quite the opposite, it does not lead to, well, only to bad things, really. So generally, that should be avoided, and in all the cases, other measures should be looked at. And again, tactical measures like smoke or vehicles not standing about in the open. And again, it's not like, for example, the American Riflemen at this point lacks smoke in any conceivable measures. Rather encourage smoke usage rather than, discourage it. Maybe it means that the smoke grenades become cheaper, for example, maybe even free. Maybe allow them to do more things for the smoke grenades, just not, run about in the open taking no hits. Again, bad. If we can do that, overall we might see some overall better infantry play and overall a lot less blobbing, because again, the received accuracy pretty much just leads to blobbing, because again, when you take close to only 50% damage from infantry sources, well, you don't really need cover now, do you? So again, that's all the trick. Then again, I do think in that sense, this veterancy system should be revamped in that direction. Obviously, you've got more topics on it, but really just felt like this one needs to be said here and now. Again, knock it off for the received accuracy bonuses. Relic, use them more moderately, more sparingly. Kind of think them like salt. Useful in small pinches, but drowning in salt and it really just becomes way too salty and not really pleasant to eat. In this case, it leads to not very pleasant gameplay. Again, it should be used sparingly to sort of enhance taste or gameplay, but don't drown it out in salt. Right, good. And again, for alternatives, other abilities, more emphasis on smoke. Sprinting, for example, could also be an option. maybe option for vehicles, just, not smoke. I mean, you can gain fair, some units' ability to move through cover, as they gain veterancy, sort of slightly cloaked, maybe an option. But again, no received accuracy bonuses. Verboten from now on, hopefully, in my dreams. So again, that's really sort of the short of it. It's not really going to be a long one again, because again, overall the whole veterancy lecture, if you will, is going to be overall very broad. So I think it's just going to cover in different videos. But again, received accuracy, no, not like this. Relic, please, not like this. It is not very functional, I would say again. Well, suppose it's functional, but it's not functional in a good, interesting, tactical manner. So again, that's what we want to avoid. You're going to give me some units maybe offensive bonuses and cover instead. Just, less received accuracy burst, basically less anything that just makes them overall able to soak up damage or ignore damage while out in the open without any sort of greater input than just standing about there, like, it's just a bit of a light rain. And again, if you can do that overall, less blobbing, more interesting gameplay. Of course, for some they might be suffering, but again, then we teach them how to play better rather than encourage them not to play better. And again, smoke is one measure, vehicles is another, sprinting, and of course there's other ways again. But please don't encourage them to stand about in the open. It doesn't lead to anything interesting. So I think that rather covers it. A bit repetitious, but I do think in this case it bears repeating. Don't just drizzle about with received accuracy bonuses. Again, it does not lead to anything good or anything interesting. It's a bit like, received, less suppression on infantry. Again, it's something you quickly spiral out of control and become very bad, and just means, again, other things don't work, and then again you encourage blobbing. Similarly, received accuracy is not something you'd be throwing at everybody. And again, by doing that, hopefully we can find other methods and something hopefully leads to more interesting gameplay rather than, again, bulletproof infantry, which isn't fun and, again, rather untactical. So again, replace it with other things. Tone it down at most, maybe 80, 75-ish. And again, those should be elite units, really expensive infantry, not basic infantry like the British infantry section, which currently has 20% bonus in that direction right off the bat. And that eventually too then hits up with the 43 or 44% bonuses, which again means they get close to the 50%. And again, veterancy too. That's not good. So again, that needs to be seriously looked into, and that needs to be, cracked down upon, and alternatives need to be looked into. And certainly for a future game, it really should not be something that happens. There should be any other kind of way to look into, improving units' reliability, but not by making them bulletproof. That one is bad. Again, for a game that wants to be about cover, tactical usage, and so on there, bulletproof infantry is, the devil. It is not something that's supposed to be there. So that covers this little lecture, this little things I'd like to see. And again, received accuracy, I do not want to see a lot of that. No more. In fact, I don't even want to see a lot of it here in Companies 2. In fact, I'd like to see some of it gone. So there you go. Hopefully this has been an entertaining and educational lecture. And if it has, subscribe, like, share, and of course tell Relic, to knock it off for the received accuracy, you dingbats. So thank you all, and see you all for another episode sometime down the road. Cheers.